They came from the far-off past.
Oh God, what is that?
Rising from their graves, they returned in the far-off future of the 80s.
Oh jeez, I can't take it!
Drawing in the youth and the outcast in the video rental stores as they would spread in the 90s with TNT's Monster Vision. This would only spread this monstrosity even further. Think of the children! In the new millennium, these same children would grow up to be visual entertainment developers, as they would spread the infection even further with their own creations. These are classic horror remnants.
Well, more specifically, we are going to be talking about 5 video games inspired by the classic era of horror movies. For some reason, there was a lot of these type of references back then. Not even just in video games, but in cartoons as well. And if you were paying attention to the intro, you will know that I believe that this was mainly because of how different accessibility of media was back in the 80s, when many of these creators were kids. There was no internet, Nicktoons didn't exist, and Cartoon Network wouldn't have been born until 1991. No! All these kids had were the gaming consoles at the time, arcades, movie theaters, TV, but only for blocks that would show at certain times of the day, and the video rental store. Unlike the age of streaming and digital media, most people had to leave their homes regularly to find some new video entertainment. Because of this, many kids and teens who were deemed as the nerds or outcasts of the era would be magnetized to the classic horror tapes. Even though these movies predated these kids for decades, they would still find a way to inspire them through Blockbuster and other rental stores. Not only this, but the creators of this era would also be inspired by that era as well, from movies like the Blob remake, or something as simple as how the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were fans of monster movies. As many creators grow up, they take these inspirations and make something new with them. So why don't we see as many classic horror inspirations today? Well, accessibility of media had changed. In 1993, the internet was released to the public. Through the internet, people would discover new media they had never seen before. Anime. Plus, with aspects like the Toonami block, the Pokemon craze, Akira, and more, we had the first anime boom in the West. Many kids of the 90s would grow up to become creators in the 2010s. Instead of classic horror movie references, we have shows and games that are inspired by 90s anime like Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, Digimon, and more, resulting in stuff like Steven Universe, OKKO, and She-Ra. And even in the early 2020s, with films like Turning Red and Bad Guys that both take visual inspiration from Studio Ghibli. It's not like anime references didn't exist in the 2000s, but they definitely weren't as common. It makes me wonder what the following generation would bring, or my generation, the ones who grew up in the 2000s. I'm assuming we're going to see a lot of entertainment inspired by Adult Swim, Newgrounds, the action cartoons and popular gaming mascots of the era, and the alternative scene. Well, I hope you enjoyed this lengthy intro. Sorry, this is just something that's been on my head for a while now, but now it's time to get started with the list. But lastly, some rules. 1. We're focusing on games from the 2000s, primarily the 6th and 7th generation of gaming. 2. The game must be heavily inspired by the classic era of horror movies, from giant monster movies, alien flicks, killers, paranormal movies, etc. 3. It has to take up the entire game, not just a single world or level. If it's not clear where the inspirations are coming from just by looking at the cover alone, then it doesn't count. With that being said, welcome to Cackling Pumpkins, and these are 5 video games inspired by the classic era of horror.
Oh, someone kill it, please! Stay away!
A mad scientist built a device that would provide free unlimited energy, but through the sabotage of a bitter rival, the machine backfires and destroys his home world. He now travels throughout the stars to collect the pieces needed to build a device to rebuild his world. See the stars and more in Dr. Muto!
Dr. Muto is a 3D platformer starring a mad scientist that mutates himself into different creatures. At the time, this was something new. Sure, back then we had power-ups that changed our appearance, or slight transformations, but for a long time, the hardware would make it exceedingly difficult to apply these more drastic transformations, especially if you wanted to design a game around it. But now that's no longer a problem. There were some issues then, but it was a sign that things were improving. Look, as much as people would complain about jank in games these days, nearly every 6th gen game had some jank, but we loved it anyway. As Dr. Muto, you must travel to 4 alien planets to retrieve the equipment needed to build a device that can rebuild the Earth. The 4 planets are set up like larger maps, not open worlds by all means, as they are still linear with some branching paths, but this was also something that was popular at the time. There are different creatures on the planet that you must not only defeat, but also absorb their DNA, so you can create other transformations. When you start the game, all you have is the mouse transformation, but as you progress through the game and collect DNA, you get even more. Throughout the game, you can hear Dr. Muto and his AI assistant Al with his deadpan delivery. I like the way Dr. Muto talks.
This must be the way to open those vat doors and drain the goo.
I have no idea what this voice is supposed to be, but I just like hearing this man speak.
I feel stronger from this magic red bubbly. My health is increased.
I like this red bubbly, my health has increased. But when he takes damage in his mouse form, he sounds like a maniac. Jesus Christ, get this man some ibuprofen immediately! Out of all the games on this list, this is the only one I have yet to beat. So sorry, but I don't really have that much to say about this one. But hey, I can waste your time in other ways. When I look up Dr. Muto by itself on Google, it brings up a bunch of doctors. Apparently Muto is a common name for doctors. I don't know how to feel about that. Amused or terrified? I'm leaning towards terrified with a hint of amusement.
Crap, I can use this to make gadgets.
When Pop fights back, Scum Lab's newest product, Scum Soda, leaves a deadly aftertaste. Those who drink it become giant rampaging mutants. If Scum Labs wants to save its reputation, it must capture and cryogenically freeze these monsters. In Rampage Total Destruction!
I'm sure when most people hear about the Rampage series, they would think about the recent film starring The Rock. But for those who don't know, this movie was based on an arcade game. A rather cartoony game, actually. Rampage first came out on arcades in 1986. This game is what the movie was based on, as there were later installments of the series. Some would act as direct sequels, while others were retelling the story. The game we're talking about is 2006's Rampage Total Destruction. This game is a retelling of the original arcade game's story, but with a few changes. In the original arcade and movie, there were only 3 monsters: George, Lizzie, and Ralph. In the game, they were humans that were turned into monsters, but in the movie, they were animals mutated into larger rampaging monsters. But in this game, there are 30 monsters, 40 if you're playing the Wii version, that were all originally human. These humans were brought into Scum Labs to taste test a new soda called Scum Soda. This soda would then mutate them into monsters as the company tries to contain them for their own sake.
Scum Soda is going to be huge! We'll launch on schedule and Scum Labs will make billions! These little incidents are not a problem!
Gentlemen, we have a problem.
Of course, being a game in the 2000s, it does have a lot more edgy humor with cartoony characters. The plot and characters are ridiculous, as monsters will burp and fart during gameplay. Hey, it could have been worse. At least it wasn't the 90s level gross out. When I was little, I was never bothered by gross out stuff. Well, there was one memory I have back in intermediate school. For those who don't know what that is, as most places don't have that, it's basically 5th and 6th grade, as middle school was 7th and 8th. Most schools would have middle school be 5th to 8th. So basically, middle school for me wasn't literally in the middle, it was just the later half. Hang on, I just learned in some places that 5th grade could be the last of elementary. Huh, neat. Anyway, I remember sitting in lunch as we didn't get to choose our seats, as they would just fill up the seats through the line. I sat next to these 2 kids I didn't know the names of, as they went into detail about how they squashed a slug in naked seats' insides. I almost threw up right then and there. So yeah, this is nothing to me. Kids are just foul. But what's the game like? You pick a monster and a map as you destroy every building on each street. Once one is clear, you move on to the next. Jumping on buildings is simple for the most part, but some angles make it a bit difficult to move around. Once you destroy enough of the building, it will collapse. Be sure to jump off or you'll fall with it. Most of the time, there will be items behind windows you smash up, but not all of them are good, so you should pay attention to what's what. Some items give you health, energy, or take either away from you. Some are general power-ups or even other monsters waiting to be awakened so that you can play as them. Each street also gives you a mission to complete. If it's based on eating people on the street or destroying vehicles, it's easy enough. But if it's based on eating a quantity of a specific food, then it's a gamble. See, to find these foods, you'll need to smash up windows, but the more you destroy, the more likely the building will collapse. Once this happens, everything inside you didn't collect will go with it. This includes the foods for the mission, so it's less about skill and more just being lucky. Hope you find what you need before the building collapses. If not, too bad. It's your fault gravity exists. Every monster plays the exact same, as this is an arcade game, but by completing missions you can unlock other abilities and stats, which are also the same with every monster.
I'm cool, bro!
This traffic report is brought to you by Scum Soda.
Think of these guys as skins of each other. By the end of the map, you'll face a boss from Scum Labs. It's a fun game to play if you want that at-home arcade experience, or to play with a friend. This game is developed by Midway. After Midway dissolved, Warner Bros. Now owns all of their characters. This includes Mortal Kombat, Ready to Rumble, Biofreaks, and the already mentioned Dr. Muto.
You know what that means? We can get a character from any, if not all of these games in the multiverses.
I don't see Dr. Muto happening, as he's not that popular of a character, but since the Rampage movie made almost $500 million in the box office, I could see a Rampage monster get into the game. My suggestion though, base them off of the cartoony arcade game, and have other monsters act as their skins. Most likely it will be George, as he's treated as the main face of the game. I mean, he is the main monster on the box art of Total Destruction. So why not add skins based on Lizzie and Ralph, the Whitefur 2018 movie version, and maybe some additional monsters from Total Destruction? This character already has a ton of potential when it comes to unlockable skins. But most likely, the first Midway character to be added to Multiverses would be Scorpion, and that already makes me very happy.
Scorpion wins. Flawless victory.
The dead, who live on living flesh. The dead, whose haunted souls haunt the living. Is it possible for the dead to feel love? Stubbs the Zombie.
In most zombie games, you have to deal with waves of zombies, but in Stubbs the Zombie, you are creating those waves. As Stubbs rises from the ground to wreak havoc in the land of the living, in the city of Punch Bowl. Punch Bowl is like a city of tomorrow. While the game takes place in the 1950s, Punch Bowl is technologically advanced, but this won't last for long as Stubbs is about to send this city into chaos. It's sort of like Bioshock as you're walking through the city of Rapture, also a futuristic city in the 1950s that's going through hell. But instead of walking into the madness, you're the one that's starting it. And instead of a horrifying underwater city filled with psychopaths and corrupted little girls, you have jocks who complain about stolen hot dogs, chainsaw-wielding farmers, and robots who are too ignorant to see the blatant carnage. Take Infobot as an example. She acts as your tutorial and is the first witness to your brain eating, but she doesn't seem to care that much, or even notice.
Why me?
Did I just see someone?
Wow, you should calm him down. He's not even twitching anymore.
The game is filled with character and personality, something a lot of 2000s games had. 3D games had gotten to the point where we didn't need silent protagonists or Mario-like mascots anymore. Not to say that this kind of stuff is bad, but these characters, as immature as they can be, showed what this generation was capable of. As you progress in the game, you gain new abilities to kill humans and convert them into your zombie army, sneaking up to them and staggering them to eat their brains, using your hand as a method of mind control which allows you to use weapons, bowling your head, toxic farts, and throwing your stomach as an explosion. All of these things use energy, and the only way to get energy and health is to eat someone's brain. I'm surprised this is the only game to really attempt to make a zombie creating experience, but it's not without its flaws. The zombies that follow you can be guided if you call for them, but only if you're close enough and you can see them. If not, then they'll ignore you. And they're much slower than you, so you have to stop every 10 seconds and call for them again. Tell me again who thought it was a good idea to have partners that are faster than your walk but slower than your run? No, come on, don't be shy. I just want to talk. Just let me ask you a question real quick. Whew. Sometimes it's not clear where you're supposed to go, especially near the end of the game. Also, it is very easy to die without other zombies by your side, but at least the game is very generous with its checkpoints. Honestly, I really enjoyed Stubbs the Zombie. It's both fun and entertaining with its own characters and sense of humor.
I got a blade in my head.
But what if you want to play this game? I know collecting retro games has become super expensive, and I should know. I do this as a hobby. $200 for Shadow Heart's Covenant? $360 for Fire Emblem Path of Radiance? $400 for Go-Go Hyperdrive? I understand the worth of these games changes over time, but this is the worst thing about retro game stores. Sometimes you'll just have to pay $10 for a PS2 game. Yeah, if it's a no-name licensed title. At this point, these stores aren't basing their prices on changes of the market like they claim to. They're blatantly making games more expensive based on the franchises they're from, or if there's a bigger chance someone will come in for them. DK Oldies is one of the biggest offenders of this. Here are just some of the prices they have for some of these games. Pokemon Fire Red can be sold up to $200. Mario Kart Double Dash and Luigi's Mansion can be sold up to over $100. And look at these prices for Zelda titles! But the Sweet Life of Zack and Cody Tipped in Trouble for the DS is only $3.
Gee, I wonder why.
It's almost as if it was never based on the changes of the market, but more because they know that retro video game collecting has become a bigger hobby, and people are more likely to come in for Mario or Zelda, so they can set it at a ridiculous price. Look at these prices for Contra, Super C, and Contra 3. In total, that's $183.97, and that's using the prices that are on sale, and not even taking into consideration the shipping price. But hey, you can get all 3 of these games and even more on the Contra Anniversary Collection on Steam for only $20. Hell, I got mine on sale for less than $5. Notes, not all retro game stores do this, so I appreciate the ones that don't, or at least restrain themselves more than DK Oldies. But hey, you don't have to worry about spending an entire grocery store bill on this one game, because it was remastered and re-released on all modern platforms. The Nintendo Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Steam, and I guarantee you it will be at a way more fair price than most retro game stores. Hey, you know what? I have an idea. If any of you guys know of any retro game store that's a lot more fair with their pricing, feel free to comment them down below, and I'll compile them into a list so you know where to go for this hobby.
Son of a bitch!
When beings from the stars come to attack the Earth, there is little man can do against the more advanced technology of the men from outer space. But even aliens can get more than what they bargained for, as their attacks create giant monsters that only have one thing in mind: carnage. Carnage of man, carnage of aliens, and even carnage of other monsters. It is all-out war in War of the Monsters.
Now this is what I'm talking about. Giant mutated monsters fighting each other in the city. That's all a game really needs to be. War of the Monsters is a 3D brawler where you can play as one of 8 monsters, along with 2 unlockables. Each monster has their own attacks, stats, and can climb up buildings and cause all sorts of mayhem. Gain power-ups, throw debris, fly across the stage, and stand on the tallest skyscrapers. It is the definition of a fun multiplayer game. There are 10 monsters you can play as: Togera, Kongor, Robo-47, Imago, Praetor, Ultra V, Ultra 5, I don't know, Connecticlops, with both Zergulon and Raptor being the 2 unlockables. The monsters themselves are either extremely obvious references to have a hard time standing on their own. Gee, I wonder who this giant gorilla named Kongor is based on, or Togera, the Godzilla-type monster. To me, the best designs are the ones that have obvious references, but take them down a different path to still help them survive on their own. like Praetor, who is obviously meant to be based on Mothra, but it isn't as obvious, or Zergulon, who's based on Mars attacks, but it still feels original. But it's worth noting that the roster is severely imbalanced. Despite only having 10 monsters, only 3 of them are actually good, these being Ultra V, Kongor, and Praetor, who I would argue is the best character in the game, as they have fast attacks, can fly, have a fast rapid-fire projectile. But the worst characters are ironically enough the 2 unlockables, being Raptor and Zergulon. Especially Zergulon, as he has attacks that cover a lot of ground, sure, but have the slowest windup, leaving him wide open and give enemies the opportunity to escape even if it's a combo that's meant to be chained. Now, I didn't really have anyone to get multiplayer footage of this game with, but hey, since this is the 6th generation, multiplayer is optional, and you can actually have single player content. Wow, incredible! For starters, there's a Super Smash Bros. Melee-styled adventure mode. I say this because it feels like an adventure you can beat in an hour, and is the same for every character. It even has similar beats to Melee's adventure mode, with the minor cinematics to set up the fight. In this adventure mode, you fight every monster in the game, and a few bosses until you get to the final boss. One flaw that the adventure mode showed me is that the game has a cowardly AI. You see, there are health pickups that spawn in each stage. This is cool and all, but whenever the AI gets some health removed, even if it's just around 50%, it'll stop in its tracks, turn to the nearest health pickup, and run straight towards it, even if it's on the other side of the map, so you have to chase them down. This wouldn't be so bad, but most of the monsters are similar in speed, so you're basically just following them, and it completely stops the match as the AI is determined to get that health. Wow. Now I'm starting to understand why competitive Smash players hate items. The stages are different major cities from across the globe, each with their own number of skyscrapers and hazards to mix things up. There are also unlockable skins for the game as well, one of which is Sweet Tooth from Twisted Metal, as the same studio who made Twisted Metal also made this game. This means that War of the Monsters is a PS2 exclusive, and considering it's a cartoony, non-realistic, non-cinematic title, you're probably not going to see a new installment for quite some time. Stupid modern California, Sony! Hey Sony, you know a good way to get me to forgive you for all of your sins? Just make a PlayStation All-Star sequel with a roster that focuses on your cartoony characters, guests, and I suppose a few realistic faces, like Nathan, Drake, Ellie, and Alloy, with a roster that's mainly based on your PS1 to early PS4 days, with an understanding as to why people enjoy the platform fighting genre. I say Zergulon. Yes, I know, I said that he is the worst character in War of the Monsters, but he does have one of the best designs, is the same species that started the game's story, and is one of the smallest characters, so it wouldn't be too unrealistic to shrink him down to at least be one of the biggest fighters in this platform fighter. Come on, if Smash has Ridley, Nick All-Stars has Reptar, and Multiverses has the Iron Giant, this can be your giant monster and your crossover platform fighter. Also, I just realized, why does almost every crossover platform fighter have a giant monster in the roster? I don't know, but keep them coming! War of the Monsters. Try it, or I will, I don't know, go to bed early and be haunted by my own thoughts. Connected Collapse is my sleep paralysis demon.
Alien life has been discovered, but little did we know that they will not be alone. For this particular alien was only one of dozens of clones, and more are coming for their revenge, and to prepare for the upcoming invasion. This is the fall of man, where aliens destroy all humans!
Of course the last game on the list has to be Destroy All Humans. Out of all the games we've talked about on the list, this is the most well-known and relevant, thanks to the recent remake and the upcoming remake of the sequel. Our main character is Crypto, who was first seen crash landing on Earth and being surrounded by army soldiers. Fortunately, this is not the first or the last Crypto. Unfortunately, this is the only way his species can survive, and they are running out of resources. The next Crypto, or Crypto-137, must try to recover the previous clone while preparing the Earth for the upcoming invasion. You are taken across the US in the 1950s as you complete different objectives. Some are based on destruction, while others are based on stealth. But this brings us to Crypto's powers. His mind powers! With the Furon's powers, he can lift objects telekinetically, drain a civilian's brain, or create a human disguise. I made it with my mind vagina. but everything involving his powers uses energy, and once you use all your energy, you must wait for them to recharge. If you're in the middle of a disguise and run out of power, you'll return to your current state. Thankfully, you can read the minds of other humans to restore energy, even while in disguise. Otherwise, the game has an alert system very similar to GTA. The more you're seen, and the more trouble you cause, the more the authorities will go after you, to the point where military tanks roll up. You do have a quick variety of weapons you can use to defeat those inferior humans with. Once you kill them, you can extract their brain using your powers and get some DNA. DNA you can also use to upgrade your powers, weapons, and spaceship. My only big problem about the game is that if you die or fail a mission, you have to do the entire thing all over again, regardless of how long the mission is and how far you were in it. Look, I'm a fan of consequence in games, but this is just ridiculous, especially since it can take you just one misstep to fail. Have mercy, sweet Jesus!
What? Destructive fool! Lands are ruined! Return to the mothership! Curse you, pathetic human!
Destroy All Humans has its own unique sense of humor that some may consider to be dated. Not offensive dated, but this was the 2000s, when being edgy was cool.
Santa Modesto is experiencing exactly the same problems we are. The difference is we have that award-winning city desk over at the Rockwell Gazette, and nothing gets past those guys. They keep me honest.
But I'm someone who's still an edgelord at heart, so I find this game hilarious. Destroy All Humans was well received and managed to sell over 1 million copies in just a year. Thus, a franchise was born. Destroy All Humans was released in 2005. Then its sequel, Destroy All Humans 2, came in 2006. But then a third installment came. Destroy All Humans Big Willie Unleashed, exclusive to the Wii, released in 2008. It was met with negative to mixed reception. The same year, we had Destroy All Humans, Path of the Furon, which was met with even worse reception. Thus, the series went dormant. No wonder Destroy All Humans was seen as a cult classic, despite the first game standing out on its own and selling incredibly well and had a good sequel. The 7th generation didn't treat this Furon well. But that all changed in 2020, when Destroy All Humans was remade and brought back into the spotlight. Unfortunately, the game wasn't reviewed as well since that 6th gen jank was still there. But hey, back in the 6th generation, we loved any game regardless of the jank because we were able to look past it. Maybe if some of you lowered your standards, we wouldn't have to deal with as much crunch time now, would we? But still, it sold better than the original, and now we're getting the sequel remade, with Destroy All Humans 2 reprobed. By the time I'm recording this video, it's expected to release on August 30th. Maybe after that we can try and remake Big Willie Unleashed and Path of the Furon and fix the problems they had. That's what I was hoping Crash would do with both Wrath of Cortex and Twin Sanity after the Insane trilogy came out, but no dice. Honestly, as great as it is that these games are being brought back for modern hardware, I personally would much rather see bad games be remade than good ones. The good ones don't need to be remade, they're already good. Just make a remaster with updated visuals, optimization, and fixing some of their problems. Put that money into remaking bad games that could have been good. But I understand, it's business and all. I'll just be happy that crypto is back. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Cackling Pumpkins, and your connection will be strange.
It didn't have to be this way, Armquist. What do you mean? I mean, this ridiculous war. We could have worked together, you and I, to forge a new future, a common future of peace and prosperity for our two peoples. Just put me out of my misery, will you? I'm serious. You didn't want to destroy us? Of course not. We were as scared of you as you were of us. Deep in our hearts, I think what we really wanted was to be just like you. Really? Really. I guess, at the end of the day, we really are all just human beings. Psych. Pathetic you.
Interesting. Some are automated, but others require human operators.
So what do I do with those?
Simple. Each unit must be connected to a nearby control console. Destroy them all! I don't care how.